Hi everyone. Today I'll be looking at Bach's use of the chromatic fourth in his chorales. The chromatic fourth consists of an interval of a perfect fourth, which has its intervening intervals chromatically connected. Technically, the chromatic fourth may be used beginning from any degree of a major or minor key. Typically, however, it's used between the fifth and first degrees of a minor key, as all the necessary notes are already present in the ascending and descending forms of the melodic minor scale. The chromatic fourth may ascend or descend, and both forms may be harmonized in several ways, although typically some form of the subdominant and dominant chords are included. The chromatic fourth may occasionally be truncated, typically omitting one of the required degrees. One or more of its degrees may also be left unharmonized and taken as a passing note. In Bach's chorales, both ascending and descending forms of the chromatic fourth are predominantly found in the bass part. In chorale 300, however, this altered descent in A minor is found in the alto part, which also has the order of its raised and lowered sixth degrees reversed. Here, the first degree is initially harmonized as the doubled root note of tonic harmony, before resolving as a 4-3 suspension to the raised 7th degree, the third of dominant harmony. The lowered 7th is then harmonized as the 5th of the secondary C-sharp diminished 7th chord, which resolves to the D minor subdominant harmonizing the lowered 6th. The raised 6th is then harmonized as the third of a secondary D-sharp diminished 7th chord, which resolves to the dominant. To avoid fifths between the soprano and alto, Bach here doubles the 5th of the dominant chord, only introducing the 5th degree of the chromatic fourth here as the 5th of tonic harmony. Beneath part of the chromatic fourth, Bach uses this chromatic rise, which may be heard as a partial ascending chromatic fourth in E minor. Occasionally, as here, two chromatic strands may be combined. In chorale 314, which in this example is modulating from the key of E minor to B minor, the partial descending chromatic fourth in the bass appears to be part of a chromatic fourth in A minor. It is, however, the lowered 7th to 5th degrees of a chromatic fourth in B minor. The lowered 7th is harmonized as the 7th degree of the B dominant 7th chord, the dominant in E minor, which then resolves to this E major chord, harmonizing the raised 6th degree. This chord acts as the pivot chord and may be heard as both the major subdominant in B minor and the major tonic in E minor. The lowered 6th is then harmonized with this chord and may be heard either as the third of a minor subdominant or as the 5th degree of a secondary C-sharp half diminished 7th chord. Although a C-sharp diminished 7th will typically resolve to a D chord, here it resolves to a second inversion B minor chord, the initial chord of a cadential 6-4 in B minor. Our ear accepts this resolution because all of the diminished chord's tendency tones resolve correctly, with the 7th eventually resolving here to the third of F-sharp dominant 7th harmony. In the soprano part, the upper tetrachord of an ascending E melodic minor scale is used, which partially intersects with the bass's descending chromatic fourth as the third of this B dominant 7th chord. In his chorales, Bach's use of partial chromatic fourths is common. This example from chorale 231 omits the 5th and flattens 6th degrees. It is from one of the many chorales which use a harmonized modal chorale melody. This one in G mixolydian is harmonized in G major. The lowered 7th of the partial descent is harmonized as the 7th of a G secondary dominant 7th chord, resolving to the subdominant of G major. Another common harmonization Bach uses for the ascending chromatic fourth can be seen in this example from Chorale 321. Here, an ascending chromatic fourth in G minor is harmonized using essentially diatonic chords with only a single secondary chord, here resolving to the subtonic. Here, Bach appears to have taken some liberties with his harmonizing of this B flat note, which together with this D dominant seventh chord produces D augmented harmony. The same progression, also in G minor, is found in Chorale 163, although here the dominant seventh is not augmented. While Bach predominantly uses the chromatic fourth between scale degrees 5 and 1, occasionally he will use other degrees. In Chorale 252, for example, this phrase in C minor includes an ascending chromatic fourth between degrees 2 and 5, which are harmonized with a series of chords leading from the B diminished leading note through to the minor dominant. This passage includes an extended fourth degree, which is initially harmonized as the subdominant, then minor supertonic, before then moving through the raised fourth, harmonized as a D secondary dominant seventh chord, to resolve to the minor dominant of C minor. Other examples using the chromatic fourth between other scale degrees include Chorale 142, where this ascending chromatic fourth in D minor lacks its second degree and moves only between degrees 3 and 5. The raised third is harmonized as the third of a secondary D dominant seventh chord, resolving to the subdominant G minor, before then moving through a first inversion E secondary dominant chord to the dominant A. Bach again appears to have taken liberties with his harmonizing, as here this F note together with the dominant chord produces an augmented dominant. Bach also occasionally uses the chromatic fourth in a major key. Examples of this usage include Chorale 310, where this ascent leads, like many ascending chromatic fourths in a minor key, through the subdominant and flattened leading note to the chorale's final cadence. This apparent secondary C-sharp dominant seventh should resolve to an F-sharp chord. In this context, however, it is formed purely by the voice leading between this A minor subdominant and D major chord on the flattened leading note. In Chorale 338, which is also a major key example, this partial descent only harmonizes scale degrees 1, 6, and 5 using tonic, subdominant, and the initial cadential 6-4 harmony, while the flat 7th and 6th degrees are here treated as chromatic passing notes. Many of Bach's chorales use one or several of these ideas to embellish the chromatic fourth. One chorale in which Bach draws together many techniques is Chorale 146. In this descending example in A minor, Bach harmonizes the raised 7th degree as the third of an E dominant 7th chord, the dominant of A minor, but which is here acting as the dominant of the following A secondary dominant 7th chord, harmonizing the natural 7th. The A secondary dominant 7th then resolves to the diatonic first inversion major subdominant, which then moves through a French augmented 6th chord, harmonizing the natural 6th degree, to the cadential 6-4, the tonic and dominant of which is separated by another secondary dominant chord, which resolves to diatonic E dominant 7th harmony. Along with the descending chromatic fourth and the bass, in the alto part, a partial rising chromatic fourth suggesting the key of E minor is used, which together with the bass line creates the underlying harmonies and a melodic drive towards the cadence in bar 5. I hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.